There's a strange paradox that unfolds in the quiet space between a man's withdrawal and a woman's curiosity. When a man begins to pull away, not with anger, not with manipulation, but with quiet certainty, something awakens in her mind that she cannot easily silence. It's not about rejection, it's about mystery. It's about the sudden contrast between the energy she once felt available and the peace she now feels denied. In that silence, her mind begins to chase what her heart cannot control. At first, she may pretend not to notice. She tells herself she's busy, she's fine, she doesn't care. But the truth is, women are deeply wired to sense energetic changes. When a man stops seeking validation, when his attention becomes disciplined instead of desperate, something inside her begins to question her own value. She wonders what changed. She wonders if she did something wrong. But more than that, she wonders what makes him so still, so composed, so unreachable. That's where obsession begins. It's not his looks, his words, or even his actions that draw her in, it's his absence. The man who pulls away with emotional control creates psychological contrast. He breaks the predictable rhythm she relied on. And that contrast, that gap between what was once certain and what's now unknown, ignites one of the most powerful emotional forces in human behavior: the pursuit of meaning. She starts replaying moments, overanalyzing texts, remembering his tone, his patience, his silence. The same man she once overlooked suddenly feels rare, even sacred. This is the quiet art of emotional gravity. When a man learns to master distance, he stops being another option in her world. He becomes a question mark she can't solve. Women don't chase men who need them. They chase the men they can't quite read, the ones whose presence once felt like safety, but whose absence now feels like loss. Every woman deep down desires a man who knows how to walk away from comfort in order to protect his peace. That's the energy of leadership, of self respect, of masculine depth. And it's magnetic because when he pulls away, he's not punishing her. He's realigning himself. He's teaching through silence what words could never express, that attention is earned, not owed. And as she begins to feel the emotional weight of that realization, the same man she thought she understood becomes a mirror for her own insecurities and desires. She becomes obsessed not because he disappeared, but because his absence reveals his worth. In today's video, we're going to break down the psychology behind this paradox, why women crave the calm detachment of the man who pulls away, how obsession forms in her mind, and how a man can embody that rare energy without games or manipulation. This isn't about tactics, it's about presence, polarity, and power. Before we start, remember if you're ready to master yourself and the dating game. My full course is waiting at the stoichop.podia.com site. Join once and you're in for life with lifetime access to every future lessons, series, and books. Start your journey now because growth doesn't wait. Section number 1, the shift in energy. When presence becomes power, something subtle happens when a man decides to stop proving himself. His energy shifts from pursuit to presence. It's not that he becomes distant out of pride. It's that he begins to recognize the sacred value of his attention. He realizes that the same energy he once poured into chasing validation can instead be used to build his discipline, his direction, and his peace. That shift, quiet, internal, and invisible to the eye, is what a woman feels long before she admits it. Presence is a frequency. You can't fake it and you can't imitate it with words. It's that calm, unshakable aura a man carries when his happiness no longer depends on someone else's approval. When he's centered, his silence feels heavier, his gaze feels deeper, and his distance feels meaningful. It's not emptiness. It's strength held back, and that's what magnetizes women more than any compliment or promise ever could. When a man moves from emotional need to emotional command, he becomes rare. In a world full of men who chase instant responses, constant contact, and validation loops, his calm indifference stands out like fire in the cold. Women can feel that difference on a subconscious level. The man who no longer reacts, who no longer pleads to be understood, begins to embody a form of peace that feels mysterious and powerful. It's as if his energy starts communicating something beyond words. I don't need you to see me. I already see myself. That statement, unspoken yet undeniable, triggers something ancient within her psychology. Because attraction at its core is about polarity, masculine direction meeting feminine curiosity. When his presence becomes grounded, her emotions rise to meet it. When he stops reaching, she starts wondering. When he steps back into his silence, her imagination rushes to fill the space he leaves behind. And the imagination is far more seductive than any physical pursuit could ever be. Women become obsessed not because a man vanishes, but because he makes his energy sacred. His distance is no longer a reaction, it's a declaration. It says, I value my peace more than your attention. And when a woman feels that kind of strength, she doesn't see arrogance, she sees purpose. She begins to crave his presence again. Not because he chased her, but because he stopped trying to earn her. This is where true masculine power lives in restraint, in the ability to stay grounded while the world tries to pull you off balance. When a man learns to control his energy, his silence speaks volumes. It becomes a lesson she feels rather than hears. And that lesson echoes in her thoughts long after he's gone. That real attraction isn't built on constant contact. It's born in the mystery of emotional self-mastery. Section number 2, The Psychology of Obsession. Why her mind fills the silence. When a man pulls away, most women don't miss the man immediately. They miss the emotional rhythm he provided, the texts, the attention, the subtle reassurance that someone was watching, listening, and caring. That rhythm becomes part of her emotional routine. And when it suddenly stops, her mind doesn't interpret it as peace. It interprets it as loss. Human psychology is wired to notice what disappears. When something that once provided validation vanishes, the brain creates tension. That tension demands resolution. And that's where obsession is born. The woman begins to replay the story, trying to find the missing pieces. She wonders why he stopped talking, what he's thinking, whether she said something wrong. But beneath those questions lies something deeper. Why am I not enough to keep his attention? This is not weakness, it's wiring. The female mind, shaped by both biology and emotional intelligence, thrives on connection. It finds safety in closeness, communication, and empathy. So when a man suddenly removes his energy, it feels like an emotional void. And the feminine mind, always seeking meaning, tries to fill that void with thoughts, fantasies, and what ifs. The more she tries to decode his silence, the more she feeds her own emotional attachment. His absence becomes a mirror, where she projects her own desires, doubts, and fears. But here's what most men never understand. When she becomes obsessed, it's not just about him, it's about the feeling he created in her. She's drawn not to the man himself, but to the emotional experience he once provided and suddenly took away. His detachment, his calm, his restraint. Those qualities create contrast. They make her realize how emotionally loud her own world feels compared to the silence he left behind. That silence, ironically, becomes the loudest voice in her life. This is why obsession doesn't start when he's around. it begins when he's gone. It's not the message he sends that keeps her thinking, it's the one he doesn't. Every unanswered text becomes a blank page for her imagination to write on. Every hour of silence becomes an opportunity for her emotions to grow louder inside her mind. The unknown becomes addictive, and in that addiction, he becomes unforgettable. The paradox is powerful. By withdrawing, the man gives her the very thing she didn't know she craved, a mystery to solve, because once a woman feels that emotional vacuum, she doesn't want to escape it. She wants to understand it. And the more she tries, the deeper she falls into the emotional maze her own thoughts created. That's the psychology of obsession. It's not manipulation, it's energy, it's the invisible pull that happens when a man stops reacting and starts radiating composure. His silence doesn't reject her, it forces her to face herself. And in that reflection, she begins to crave not his attention, but his peace. Section number 3. Emotional control, the silent language of power. A man's true power doesn't come from how loud he speaks or how often he acts. It comes from how deeply he can remain still when everything around him demands a reaction. Emotional control is not coldness, it's discipline. It's the ability to stay centered when her emotions fluctuate, when situations provoke uncertainty, and when the easy response would be to explain, chase, or plead. But the man who understands emotional control knows that silence can speak what words can never say. In the realm of attraction, control equals mystery. When a man doesn't rush to clarify his feelings, doesn't beg to be understood, doesn't react to her emotional storms, he breaks the pattern most women are used to. She expects emotional volatility. She expects debate, explanation, or drama. But instead, she finds calm, an unshakable stillness that reflects strength rather than indifference. That stillness disarms her because it's rare. In a world where everyone seeks attention, the man who guards his emotions becomes the most valuable presence in the room. Emotional control doesn't mean pretending not to care. It means caring intelligently. It's understanding that energy flows where attention goes. The moment a man starts chasing validation, he gives away the power of his attention. But when he masters the pause, when he allows silence to stretch without fear, he becomes magnetic. His peace becomes the new standard by which she measures every other man. Every woman, consciously or not, is drawn to the man who can feel deeply but remain composed. It's not the absence of emotion that attracts her, it's the containment of it. That quiet restraint signals maturity, authority, and security. It tells her that he is not ruled by impulse or insecurity. And because she can feel that balance, she begins to trust his presence even in his distance. His energy says, I'm here, but I'm not dependent. I feel, but I'm not controlled. That message, subtle yet profound, creates the emotional polarity that fuels desire. When a man learns to regulate his emotions, he becomes untouchable in the best way. No argument can shake his peace. No rejection can define his worth, and no silence can make him desperate. That's when his energy becomes irresistible. Not because he's performing, but because he's mastered the rare art of self-possession. His emotional control is not a wall, it's a mirror. It reflects back to the woman her own emotional turbulence and invites her to rise to his frequency. And that's the silent language of power. When your composure inspires calm in others without a single word, the man who embodies this doesn't need to prove anything. His stillness does the talking. And once a woman experiences that, she doesn't forget it because she doesn't just desire him, she respects him. Section number 4, the pullback effect. When distance creates desire, every woman has felt it. The sudden shift when the man who once gave her constant warmth becomes quiet, self contained, and mysteriously focused elsewhere. At first, it feels like rejection, but over time, something more powerful takes hold. Her mind starts to orbit around the absence of his attention, and her emotions begin to follow. That's the pullback effect. The invisible law of attraction that begins the moment a man stops overgiving his energy and reclaims it for himself. Desire doesn't grow in comfort, it grows in contrast. When a man pulls away with emotional control, he creates that contrast. He no longer floods her with reassurance. He no longer tries to convince her of his worth. Instead, his distance reminds her of what his presence truly meant. The more he focuses on himself, his mission, his discipline, his peace, the more she begins to feel the quiet weight of that absence. She starts remembering his tone, his patience, the way his attention once felt grounded and intentional. That memory becomes a craving. Psychologically, this happens because distance activates pursuit. When something we value steps out of reach, the brain releases dopamine, not from possession, but from anticipation. Her mind begins to chase closure, replay conversations, and romanticize his energy. It's not that she suddenly realizes he's perfect, it's that she realizes he was present in a way few men are. The silence he leaves behind begins to feel like a void she wants to fill. Not because she needs validation, but because she senses depth she didn't fully appreciate before. The man who understands the pullback effect doesn't weaponize it. He doesn't disappear to manipulate her feelings. He steps back to protect his energy and restore balance. He knows that giving too much of himself too soon creates emotional debt, where one person invests while the other simply receives. So he stops overextending not as punishment but as preservation. His distance says, I value connection, but I won't abandon myself to keep it. And that boundary, when felt rather than spoken, commands both respect and fascination. In his absence, her emotions mature. She starts to see that his silence was not indifference, but integrity. That realization shifts the dynamic completely. The chase reverses. The same woman who once had the upper hand begins to reach out. Not because he pressured her, but because she feels the gravity of what she lost. That's the paradox. Distance, when done with calm intent, doesn't destroy attraction, it deepens it. It turns interest into reflection, curiosity into craving, and attachment into awakening. The man who learns this truth stops fearing distance and starts mastering it because he understands something timeless. When a man's energy is no longer freely given, it becomes desired, and that's when obsession takes root. Not in his presence, but in the silence that follows his peace. Section number 5, Masculine Mystery, the Power of the Unknown. There's a reason mystery has always been the heart of attraction. What we can't fully define, we can't fully dismiss. And in a world drowning in oversharing and emotional noise, the man who remains composed, private, and unpredictable becomes magnetic. His silence isn't emptiness, it's depth. His restraint isn't distance, it's discipline. The mystery surrounding him is not confusion. It's the quiet signal that his world has layers and not everyone gets access to them. When a man holds back his full emotional display, he forces others to engage with their imagination. And the imagination is the most dangerous instrument of desire. Women don't fall in love with a man because they figured him out. They fall in love because they can't. The unknown becomes an emotional puzzle that draws them in piece by piece, question by question. Every pause, every measured word, every unexplained decision, adds to the invisible portrait she's painting in her mind. But here's the truth most men never understand. Mystery isn't about pretending to be something you're not. It's about having something deeper that you don't feel the need to explain. It's the quiet self-assurance that comes from purpose, from mastery, from knowing who you are when no one is watching. When a man carries that inner depth, his presence becomes unpredictable in the most elegant way. She can't categorize him. She can't read him easily. And that uncertainty creates fascination. Mystery is not manipulation. It's maturity. It's the art of revealing yourself slowly, intentionally, without surrendering your center. It's saying less and meaning more. It's the ability to remain composed when others are desperate for attention, and that composure sends a powerful message. My energy is sacred. My emotions are earned. My access is selective. Those unspoken boundaries create tension, the kind that fuels attraction, not conflict. A man who is mysterious doesn't ghost or play games. He simply doesn't perform. He's consistent in his silence, intentional with his actions, and clear in his values. He knows that mystery isn't about creating confusion. It's about maintaining contrast. When everything around her is loud, his calm becomes intriguing. When every other man is trying to be seen, his stillness makes her want to look closer. This is why women obsess over men who hold mystery like armor. It's not about power, it's about presence. It's the quiet confidence that says, "You can feel me, but you'll never fully predict me." That kind of man doesn't chase attention. He commands it through scarcity. And in that scarcity lies his allure. Because mystery, when aligned with masculine integrity, becomes the rarest form of attraction. The kind that makes her feel safe yet curious, connected yet challenged, close yet never complete. And once a woman feels that emotional contradiction, she doesn't move on easily because what she desires is not just the man himself, but the enigma his energy represents. Section number 6. When her obsession turns to respect, the turning point. Obsession begins in curiosity, but it evolves in realization. At first, she's drawn to his mystery because it challenges her control. She can't read him, can't predict him, and that unpredictability stirs both attraction and frustration. Yet, as time unfolds, something unexpected happens. What began as a craving for his attention slowly transforms into admiration for his composure. She starts to understand that his silence wasn't a strategy, it was strength. His detachment wasn't punishment, it was peace. The turning point arrives when she no longer sees him as the man who walked away, but as the man who never lost himself. She begins to recognize that his restraint wasn't coldness, it was protection. In a world where most people overshare, overreact, and overextend, his ability to stay grounded stands out like a quiet storm. She starts to sense that the same energy she once called distance was in truth self-respect. And that realization changes everything. When obsession turns into respect, her emotional lens shifts from need to value. She no longer feels compelled to chase his presence. She wants to understand it. She sees how he moves differently, how he carries peace as power, how his discipline radiates calm authority. That recognition pulls her out of emotional impulse and into reflection. She begins to mirror his energy, softening her urgency, slowing her reactions, trying to meet him at his frequency. This is where the dynamic transforms. The man who once represented mystery now becomes the standard by which she measures other men. Because what she feels is no longer fleeting desire, it's grounded admiration. She respects the way he handled conflict without hostility, how he chose silence over chaos, how he walked away not to wound but to honor himself. And that respect creates a lasting emotional imprint. She may forget his words, but she'll never forget the way his energy made her feel. Safe, challenged, and curious all at once. This is the silent evolution of attraction. The shift from emotional intensity to emotional integrity. It's the point where she realizes that what drew her in was not his withdrawal. It was his wholeness. The kind of wholeness that doesn't demand validation, doesn't lose composure, and doesn't seek revenge. The kind of wholeness that invites rather than persuades. And that's the secret few men ever reach. The point where their stillness commands respect rather than confusion. Because once a woman sees that a man can love deeply without losing himself, she never looks at him the same way again. She may move on, but she'll always measure others by his calm. His energy becomes the quiet benchmark she remembers every time chaos enters her life again. At that moment, his silence no longer torments her. It teaches her. She learns that strength isn't loud, that power doesn't need validation, and that peace, when embodied by a man, is the most irresistible form of presence there is. In the end, everything comes back to one timeless truth. The man who can walk away with peace always walks away with power, because real attraction isn't about chasing emotions. It's about mastering them. The woman may never fully understand what changed in him, but she will always feel it. His silence, his discipline, his composure all become the language of a man who no longer seeks validation because he already knows his worth. The obsession she feels isn't born from loss, it's born from awakening. She begins to see the rare difference between a man who wants her and a man who chooses himself first. And that realization rewires everything. The man who once seemed distant now represents stability. The peace she once resisted becomes the peace she now desires. That's the paradox of masculine energy. It attracts most when it no longer needs to. The truth is, a man's silence is not about ignoring her. It's about listening to himself. It's about hearing his own intuition louder than her noise, about choosing growth over approval, and about protecting his emotional rhythm from chaos disguised as connection. And when he finally learns to sit comfortably in that stillness, something sacred happens. His presence begins to speak without sound. He doesn't have to explain his worth. His life becomes the proof. This is where the Stoic path begins. Not in detachment from love, but in detachment from dependency. The Stoic man doesn't pull away to hurt. He pulls away to heal. He doesn't withhold affection to punish. He withholds energy to preserve. His boundaries are not walls. They're gates that open only to peace. And once a man reaches that level of self-command, he stops negotiating his value. He understands that not everyone deserves access to his calm. For the woman, that realization often arrives too late. She begins to see that the man she once misunderstood was never playing games. He was mastering himself. And that's the kind of power that lingers because when she finally meets another man, she'll feel the difference immediately. The others may speak louder, move faster, try harder, but none will match the quiet certainty of the one who walked away without needing to prove anything. That's the ultimate power of silence. It doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it doesn't explain. It transforms, it shifts the dynamic from confusion to clarity, from emotional chaos to emotional command. And so the lesson is simple but profound. A woman's obsession fades with time, but her respect for a disciplined man never does. In the end, it's not the man who talks the most who leaves the mark. It's the one who mastered the art of walking away with peace. Because real strength doesn't shout. it simply stays silent and becomes unforgettable.